Rob, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
I am super pumped to have you on the show because as you and I were just chatting, we have a lot of backdrop that is connecting us and led us to today. So maybe before we kind of dive into all that and have a bunch of inside stories, maybe for the listeners that are not familiar with your backstory, maybe can you go back to how you became an entrepreneur and maybe a couple milestones to where you got to where you are today?
Sure. Early on, my best friend Joel Perlman and I actually started selling blow pop lollipops out of our locker in high school. This was in 9th grade. And we found a place where we could buy them in bulk, 5 cents each. We would resell them for 25 cents. Great margins, fun business, great product. People were lined up, the students were lined up and down the hallways to purchase them from us at lunch. And we just became known as the blow pop guys. And we'd be walking around the school after lunch with these baggies of quarters in our pockets. It was hilarious. We had a great time. But we knew then that the entrepreneurial bug had bit us. We had a bunch of little ventures through high school and in college. And when we were coming out of college with not much in the way of job prospects, Joel actually read a classified ad in the back of Entrepreneur magazine about these new things called laser printers. And I think they were around 3 years old at the time. And the cartridges that went into them were very expensive. So that much hasn't changed. But we would go and learn how to remanufacture these toner cartridges. And we thought it was a great idea. We learned, we started the business out of our basement. And although we're a much different business today, that was our roots. The first year we did $6,700 in business. The second year we did $40,000. The third year we did $110,000. So suffice it to say, we were making no money whatsoever. It was pretty depressing.
So, and that's where the backdrop comes in, where our first, because I think we were, from Imaging Pad buying, we used to buy remanufactured toner, whether it was from Caton. I think you were actually one of our suppliers at one point.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. So thank goodness we don't do that anymore, by the way. So yeah, that was a tough business.
So then, as you guys jumped headfirst into, becoming entrepreneurs, first of all, what year was that?
That was 1991.
Okay. Because then you guys, the whole industry evolved a lot and you guys built a very sustainable business. And kind of walk us through some of the milestones, because you ended up selling the business in the early 2000s. So kind of maybe, give us a couple of the highlights and how, you were going about that journey and then kind of what led up to you guys actually selling the business.
Mm-hmm. The first 10 years, we were just figuring things out and tripping over each other. There was no structure to the company whatsoever. Joel and I were just pounding the pavement, trying to sign up new customers, trying to manage a small team and grow the business. But we were really challenged. On top of that, being such close friends, we're best friends, we're like brothers. And that was certainly stressful. We purchased a small IT company around 10 years in. We thought it would be a great business add-on to what we were doing. And we quickly found out it couldn't be more different. And so I know you can relate on some level. We were talking a little bit before. And a friend of ours, we were struggling, and a friend of ours said, hey, there's this guy named Gino Wickman. He just sold his family company. He's very reasonable and very practical, and maybe he could share some words of wisdom for you. And he's created this process for running a business, so that might be useful for you too. And so we met with Gino, and first and foremost, he gave us some great advice, and he just said the best companies around are super focused. And he even gave us a book called Focus by Al Reese. And so we just had to put our egos aside, get rid of that IT company, and chalk that up to a learning experience, and stayed focused ever since. The next great thing that happened.
Can I interrupt just a little bit, because I think I want to peel that back a little bit, because I did that exact same distraction probably about 15 years later than you, but we never actually had that eye-opening, hey, this is a different business. Because I think our old industry, or your current industry, is a flashy object. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs are the flashy object, but the copier managed IT, that whole, like, a lot of these companies spread themselves so thin with all these different business, units. How did you guys go about, dwindling that down to figure out what your focus was? Was it about value creation in the business? Was it just because there was stress on the different types of operations? How did you guys go through that process and land on where you should actually focus?
Yeah, it was the second part that you said of what you said. We thought it would be a very similar business. So, for example, when a printer was down, we had a brand guarantee. We would be out within 4 hours, or the call was free. It wasn't like that in IT services. Oftentimes you'd be out there for a full day, and some jobs were more critical than other jobs, because people's servers would be down and they couldn't work. Where printers, they didn't have the same level of urgency. So just so many things were so different. Even the hiring, the types of technicians you needed, they were just totally different than a printer technician. I could go on, but we just realized this is such a different business, and we were just struggling.
Well, how did you, yes, I agree, because I've been through that exact same turmoil. How did you, was it tough making that decision with all the sunk costs of, the actual capital and emotional energy to actually sunset that, especially as, you and I had been at the same trade shows where you get all these people just pumping you with this idea that you need to be in this because that's just what you need to do. How did you fend off that pressure and, or, the sunk cost fallacy that you had to deal with?
Well, first of all, I kept saying, we got to make this work. We can make this work. We're smart enough. And I'm just glad that throughout my career, I've been able to bring in people that weren't as connected to it as I am, and where the ego doesn't play in. And in this particular case, Gino was that person, and he said some things that resonated with Joel and myself. And so it was kind of the kick in the butt that we needed. And we knew that the sunk costs, that was painful. We knew that going to the team and saying this didn't work out, we knew, that all this excitement we had created was all, we might say for nothing, but I would say it was actually for the greater good, and I learned a ton from it. But it was worth it. And sometimes you have to swallow your ego, and that's what we did. And it was a great decision, because we went back to what we were doing really well. And it was really refreshing to say, you know what, we saw something shiny, we went for it. Now it's out of our system. Let's stay focused, because we learned that lesson.
So, yeah, and explain maybe just on a light brush stroke on the traction methodology and, what your business was like before that, obviously with IT services, but what was the business like in the internal atmosphere when you guys were running traction, and how did you guys use it to project your forward strategy?
Before traction, we had no way of running the company. There was very little in the way of structure and accountability. People had their roles in the company, but were they measured? How were they held accountable? We weren't even doing one-on-ones. We didn't have a set of core values. We were a couple nice guys running a nice business, but it was just really all over the place. Bringing EOS in brought everything to light for us. So starting with creating our core values, and then having to take a look at our team. And once those were defined, going through, easily a 3-year process of saying who we thought was right really isn't right for the company anymore, right fit, right seat. And so it was a challenging time, but it was also an exciting time, because we just kept getting clearer and clearer about what we did well and who we were as an organization.
So how did what was that for you guys? What did you guys land on the future vision of where you wanted to take the business and who you guys were and who the company was? And how did that align with your future strategy?
Well, we never had any thoughts per se of selling. So we just were looking out. When we first got started with EOS, we really just focused on the 3-year picture. So we'd have our 1-year goals, our 90-day, what EOS calls our rocks. They're basically 90-day initiatives or mini goals. And then we'd have our 3-year picture. So we were always moving toward that 3-year picture. We had a BHAG, which was part of the vernacular of EOS at that time. I think they call it the 10-year target now. But that wasn't really clear for Joel and myself at that time. So as we were taking baby steps into EOS and integrating it into the company, some things were clicking really well, some things weren't. And I'm glad that we had the attitude that we didn't have to be perfect at it right out of the gates, and that we knew it would be a journey, and it really has been. And so as time went on, we really dialed in and got very strong with all the components of EOS. You asked about the vision. Actually, we ended up creating our vision at a place called Zing Train, which is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it's part of its roots come from a deli called Zingerman's Deli, which has this extraordinary level of service that they bring beyond really wonderful food. And they took what they were doing at the deli and they started training other companies and entrepreneurs and business people on how to provide extraordinary service. They also had a very unique way of creating a vision, and we learned how to do that visioning process with them. And that's what became, I guess, what you could call our BHAG. And so for us right now, it's our 2026 vision.
Got it. So, I'm curious, when you're going through that vision process, was it a vision for the business, or was it a vision for you and Joel, or a combination of the both? We have our individual visions, each one of us, that have to play into the company's vision. So as part of the Zingerman's visioning process, it's actually fully collaborative with the entire company. Oh. So everybody's involved in crafting it. Now, the shareholders, being Joel and myself, because Joel and I are shareholders in the company, but we also have jobs there, CEO and president. So we separate those two. So as shareholders in the company, the team needs to understand what Joel and my visions for our future are, because it is our business. If we're going to create this together, they have to have that in mind. Our team members do. And so that's part of Zingerman's process. The shareholders come to the front and they talk about important things that relate to their future. And then we start crafting the vision for the company. So as a lot of this stuff is becoming clear and your business is becoming a little bit more, systematized with traction, where in this process did the triggering event, what triggered it for you guys to originally sell? Because if selling or exiting wasn't part of, all of that stuff, where did it come to fruition in the conversations?
It's funny. I've been thinking about talking to you, and I thought to myself, I don't know if you get this story very often, but this is our story. So basically what happened was, on a complete fluke, we received a web inquiry back in, I think it was 2002, from a very large hospital system in Columbus, Ohio. And we happened to be in Detroit, so it was outside of our market. And they wanted to talk to us about what's now called managed print services. So we followed up on the lead. We ended up getting a meeting. The whole time we're thinking, there's no way we're getting this account. It's a huge deal. I mean, we're up against national companies. We're this little company up in Detroit. Well, fast forward, we won the business. I still can't believe it. So we won the business, and that was around 2004 when this all happened. And we beat an incumbent that happened to be in there that was a national company. And they contacted us about 6 months later and said, hey, you beat us out at this hospital system. And frankly, we can't believe it. What are you guys doing? And can we meet? We just want to meet. So Joel and I are open. I mean, there's not a ton of secrets, in our particular industry. It's pretty, there isn't a lot of secret sauces as far as I can tell. So we invited them in, and great people, got to know them a little bit. We later learned what their real motives were, which was not too long after that. They contacted us about the idea of a potential acquisition. And they were a traditional copier-based company, and they were looking to get into the managed print services business. And we were a potential very simple way for them to do that. We weren't huge. They could leave us as a wholly owned subsidiary, let Joel and I run it. No synergies, keep all the team intact. And so we got in discussions with them. Joel and I just said, let's just say a number. We didn't go off of multiples or anything like that. We just set a number. I was just, and then the conversation kept going on. Literally after, I think it was 4 months, we finally engaged our attorney. And he said, wait, you've been doing this for 4 months already? And so that was another lesson that we learned, which was, don't wait 4 months to start engaging your attorney. And then just one thing led to another, and we sold the business. There was a cash payout up front for Joel and myself. There was a 3-year employment contract, which had cash payouts each year. And so that was at the end of 2004. And for the first time, basically in our lives, we were employed by someone other than ourselves, and we had vice president titles, and our job was to run imageOne, again, as a wholly owned subsidiary, and train their 500 sales reps around the country on how to sell managed print services.
Oh my gosh. So first of all, I want to peel back into so many parts of that story because I love it. But I'm just having this vision of trying to train 500 copier reps, and I kind of have a stomach ache.
I love this.
I'm like, so I'm sure, Rob, it's like solutions, sell boxes.
You know too much.
I know. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay. So let's actually, for the rest of, like I said, we'll try and avoid some of the inside jokes here, but let's go back, Rob, because I'm curious, because a lot of businesses and owners have the out of the blue offer, which is how the conversations start. Whether it's, going to a trade association or golfing or an inquiry like that, when you guys had some pretty clear visions of where you wanted to take the company, everything like that, what led you, so you got the number, what led you to continue the conversations? Because did your vision of your future change and how you were because I think, a lot of us entrepreneurs, we go for growth, and then all of a sudden something like that kind of shakes us a little bit, going, okay, I didn't know there was other options out there. So what about it intrigued you, and why did you guys end up going through with the actual acquisition?
We thought we had something special, and we had high aspirations. We were talking, we could take this company national. Joel and I just had big ideas, and this was a platform for that. Now, 500 sales reps, I didn't know what we were getting into. And I like to say, and Gino taught me this phrase, vision without execution is hallucination. So it was a great vision. But to your point, training 500 copier salespeople to sell solutions-based services and products, I had no idea. And it just was not clicking with them. On top of the fact that they couldn't be held accountable because we were a wholly owned subsidiary. And here was this big company on a big system, Oracle. And, everything was driving through that system, and we had our little system that they didn't change. So the sales people's behavior wasn't changing. So out of the 500, we might have had 5% that grabbed it and said, this is a great way to ingrain myself into my customers. So they really got it. But everyone else, it just wasn't working. Their behaviors, I don't blame them. Their behaviors and how they were compensated was being driven a totally different way. So who could blame them?
So I totally agree. And because I've tried to train an IT service rep and a managed IT rep and a software and a copy rep, and it's just like that is a challenge that is only for saints that have patience. But I'm curious, when you were in those conversations, because I think this happens to a lot of people where they end up selling their business because there's all these conversations or these kind of the honeymoon of what all the things that we can do, and then things just are executed differently. Do you believe that they wanted to actually do that, and then they just weren't able to overcome some of the the back end challenges, or do you think it was kind of like a bait and switch?
No. I think their heart was in the right place. They really did see a great opportunity there. And unfortunately, again, it was a bigger company, so there was executive turnover. So then somebody new would come in, and then they'd be trying to, it'd take them like 3 or 4 months just to figure out, like, okay, what's imageOne? And why did we buy them? And how does this fit? And by the time they got themselves up to speed, and we started to make a tiny bit of traction, somebody would change again. I mean, that's actually what happened. I think we had 4 different people that came into the role that, oversaw our division over the period of time that they owned us.
So I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been.
It was very frustrating.
So how did you guys deal with it? Now that you're employees, you can't dictate the outcome as much as you used to be able to. I mean, how did you guys deal with it emotionally?
Honestly, I had to go to therapy. So that was one way I did it. I was an anxious person to begin with, and my stress was just going through the roof. And so I'll never forget, I like to tell this story that in 2005, so this was literally less than a year into the 3-year employment agreement. It was the summer of 2005, and I was on vacation with my family, and they were outside. They were enjoying the day. It was beautiful. And I was inside, I was working, and I was very frustrated. I felt like I had no control, and I was really actually on the verge of tears. And being an anxious person by nature, I'd read about different ways of, kind of how you could cope with this, therapy being one of them. Another was meditation, but I'd never tried it. And that particular day, I don't know what it was, other than the fact that maybe I was just sort of at my point. I looked over at this chair that was in the room, and I just told myself, Rob, go sit in that chair and breathe in and breathe out and breathe in and breathe out. And that's what I did for about 5 minutes. And when I was done, my problems didn't go away. The frustrations were still ever present, but I felt a little bit calmer. I felt a little bit clearer in my mind. And so that was another way that I started to be able to handle the situation that we were in. And it resulted into a practice that I've had ever since.
Well, and I want to go back to that, because that you ended up writing a book that's coming out soon called Donothing, and you've been meditating for a long time now. And I want to peel that apart, but I want to continue on the story for a second, because how did the meditation and this kind of clear mindset, how did you go back, and how did you decide to resolve your problem that you were in with this lack of control? Where did you fit in this big picture? Who are you if you're just an employee? How did you end up, tackling that problem?
Well, it was certainly a process, and I'm not sure that I ever really figured it out, but I was starting to let go and not be so attached to how I felt it needed to go. I'm a results-oriented person, and when the results weren't there, that's frustrating to me. But I also knew I started to realize there were things well beyond my control. I could only do what I could do. And if I could look myself in the mirror and know that I gave my full effort and my full, my best, that's all I could really do. And that was very helpful. So now, since that time I started, meditating, which was in the summer of 2005, as these executive changeovers started to happen, a new CEO came in March of 2006. And when that happened, Joel and I got on the plane and went and visited with him right away. And we just said, here's what's happening. What's going on? What are your thoughts? And he was a real reasonable, practical person. I've always appreciated that about this person. And he listened to what we had to say. He gave it some thought. He spoke with his leadership team, and he contacted us literally, I think, 2 weeks later, and they made an offer to have us buy the company back. And so what that meant was we would just forego the last 2 payments. And so Joel and I decided to do that. So we actually got the company back in June of 2006. This whole thing was an 18-month journey.
That's amazing. So I got a couple questions on that. One is, for the whole purchase price, did you get a significant amount of the cash up front, or like, so, I mean,
Yes. The majority was up front. Yes.
So did you guys, okay, so that's awesome. First of all, just for all the reasons that it is awesome. And then, but when you have this offer and you kind of now got this, a little bit of a different life lens that you're starting to see through, what did you think about in your head, or what was the dialogue with Joel on whether you wanted to take that on again?
That's a great question. We actually questioned whether we wanted to do it. First of all, we were foregoing 2 payments, and all we had to do was hang out for another 18 months. We already had ideas for other things that we could do. So there was that component there. And we were exhausted with the industry after this whole situation. Uh-huh. So, there was that part of it. But this book, and you and I were talking before about this book, Small Giants, was ended up on my desk. And to this day, I don't know who sent it to me. And I don't even know, why I started sort of flipping through it. But I did. I picked it up. I started flipping through it, and I saw the name Zingerman's. And Zingerman's, as I mentioned before, mm-hmm. has been such a impactful part of Joel and my education, and they've been a mentor to us. And I read the section on Zingerman's, and then I read the book, and Joel read the book, and we thought, wow, we can build a different kind of company that's more in alignment with who we are as people. And so we said, let's do it. Let's take the company back, and let's be really focused on these core qualities of Small Giants.
So I love it, because for the listeners, whether what episodes they've listened to or not, is I've interviewed Norm Brodsky from City Storage on the show too. And he's an amazing individual, because he went through a similar story where he had a first company and then he reinvented a different kind of company for the second one. And Bo Burlingham and Paul Spiegelman are all these people that are surrounded the Small Giants. But for the people that haven't heard those episodes or have little tidbits of this, Rob, can you explain to them what a Small Giant is and how the company operates and the different things that they take into consideration versus some other kind of company?
Yes. So there's 6 qualities that they look at in companies that are Small Giants. And the first thing is they have to have a strong purpose, a vision, a powerful mission, core values that can be brought to life. There's strong leadership, and typically the leaders are what you might call servant leaders, and they lead through the values. The culture is usually intimate. The employees, the team members are put first. We care for employees in the totality of their lives. Finance. Companies that protect their gross margins without compromising the company values is very key. There's the customers and cultivating these meaningful relationships with them, as well as suppliers and anybody who has a stake in the business. And then the last thing is community, and just really having deep roots in their communities. So, I always like to think about this, and I learned this from the Small Giants community, is if we weren't around anymore, would anybody notice in the community? Mm-hmm. And so that's the bar that we try to set for ourselves. So we use those 6 qualities. Now, I'll share a story with you real quick where it's just lucky. And I went to a Zing Train workshop on visioning. And while I was there, it was their first one. And while I was there, Ari Weinsweg, who's the founder of Zingerman's, was teaching it. And that was great. And he's an amazing person. And I was in line at lunch during the break, and I struck up a conversation with this person. And he was asking me all kinds of questions. And he was very interested in this whole acquisition situation that had just taken place and the buyback and all that. And I thought, wow, this guy is so curious, but he knows his stuff. And so I turned the tables. I started asking him some questions. Well, it turned out to be Bo Burlingham, the author of Small Giants. And I thought, wow, you have no idea, Bo. Like 3 months ago, I read your book. It really, it got us to buy the company back. This is crazy. And so Bo and I stayed in touch. And about a year later, he contacted me and he said, I'd like to invite you to be part of 10 entrepreneurs, part of a group of 10 entrepreneurs, and I'm going to take you and the 10 entrepreneurs around the country twice a year. We're going to pick a city, and we're going to go visit small giants, the founders, their leadership teams, and all from the book, and then so many that didn't make it into the book that totally could have. And so we have been traveling around twice a year since that time with Bo, and wow, you can't imagine the wisdom that I picked up, these little nuggets, every single trip that I could just bring back and slowly integrate into our company. And wow, well, and it's crazy even just thinking about it.
Well, and Bo is like the most amazing person ever. And he's got so much wisdom and so much care for these people. So, I mean, just following him around like that, it would be amazing. So, but then you've got the exposure to these other small giants, how, Rob, you said you got lots of gold nuggets. What are some of the bigger takeaways that you've had because I'm pitching you got this different relationship with your business and your people and the culture and your purpose. What are some of the, major gold nuggets that you brought back that have stuck with you and how you've realigned all these different dynamics in your life?
There's a few things. The first is caring for the people, the totality of their lives. They're humans. There's not a structure where, we're the smartest and they just come to work. This is a life experience that we happen to be together in, and they get to choose as much as we get to choose. And I'm nothing without the team. And so that was really neat to see these companies around the country who operate with that principle. And so who care so deeply about their people. So we did things like, for example, all of our team members each year fill out and or update a vision and goals worksheet. And so they create their vision for the future, and then they break it down into 5-year and 3-year and 1-year increments. And then our leadership team is responsible for working quarterly with every one of our team members to help them reach their life's goals. And sometimes it might have, and usually it, doesn't have much to do with our company, but that's great because we want to be lifter-uppers. And so that's what we do. And that is an idea that, I picked up along the way. Here's another one. I met Jack Stack through Bo, who wrote the book, The Great Game of Business. And The Great Game of Business teaches a system for open book management, which I resisted for years. But when I realized that I'm dealing with just regular people like myself, and the more information that they have, the more they can be empowered and make smart decisions. And Jack convinced me of that. We opened up our books, and That's awesome. I would have never done that. And that was one of the best decisions we've ever made. It's a turning point for us.
So that's awesome. And I know there's a lot of complications being able to open up the kimono like that when you're the owner. And, then all of a sudden you got questions, getting everybody on the same page. How much does Rob make? Why does he make it? And all that kind of stuff. Even teaching people financials. And, and you're aligning a culture, which Bo talks a lot about along with Jack Stack in that book. And I'm curious, Rob, so, you haven't mentioned the book Finish Big yet, but I know you were mentioned in that book that Bo wrote. So maybe, I guess one of my questions for you, and I want to maybe talk through it because I was talking to Bo on it when I interviewed him, is can you finish big and be a small giant? How does Rob and your vision for who you are, your business, what the relationship you have with your business, how does that fit into the long-term vision of you while keeping the integrity of being a small giant? I don't know if you've figured that out, if it's a process that you're going through, but yeah, I'm curious on what your thoughts are on that.
It's definitely a philosophical question, and one that Bo and I had a lot of back and forth with when he was writing Finish Big, because I just don't have the answer to that. I look at Paul Spiegelman, whom you and I spoke of, and Paul sold his business, Barrel, which was a call center for healthcare, for the healthcare industry. And, certainly his company was a small giant, got integrated into a gigantic company. I don't know what it looks like today, but Paul certainly lived by those values, but also understood that he had decisions personally that he had to make in his life that made sense for him and his family. So I don't know if that means all of a sudden he's not a small giant. I don't look at that as being the case, and I'm very close with Paul. And so I know Paul to be an amazing person who cares deeply about people and takes care of them at in small and big ways all around. Yep. So I don't know the answer to that. There are ideas about employee ownership, ESOPs. Mm-hmm. That's a way potentially to finish kind of big. Jack Stack would advocate that, and he's certainly doing well with that philosophy. And then there's companies that struggle with that philosophy, where there are complications that have made it a situation where the shareholders aren't finishing big. So that's something we investigate, but I don't have the answer right now.
Well, it is. I think it's thinking about it is, that's the whole purpose of the show here too. Cause for the listeners that have heard some of my backdrop too, like in our old world, in your current world, mm-hmm. a lot of times there's a strategic acquisition. The first one you were, left as a wholly owned subsidiary, but a lot of times it's a strategic purchase and there's a lot of redundancies. Yes. So what I struggled with huge, and I'm curious on how that fits into your, because you're very much like me, where I cared so much about my employees and all this, but all of a sudden in a strategic sale, they don't need them, or most of them. So mm-hmm. how do you deal with that? And does that work with me and what I want? And you get the financial, all of these dynamics that play together. I don't know how, do those play into kind of your vision of, how you're going to be treating your second exit whenever and however that looks?
I mean, I think what I have the philosophy, the discussion that I have with Bo is that life takes on different ebbs and flows. And so what might be important to me when I was 35 and we sold the business, now I'm 48, these are different things. And so life takes on different paths. And so I just don't know 100% how I will feel. So when I've written my vision, there are certain pieces to it, and the company has access to it, so they know exactly where I stand. How I get there financially, I don't 100% know if that's a complete sale, and what I'll be grappling with at that time about if there were redundancies and people might lose their jobs. As I talk to you today, that makes me sick to my stomach. And yeah. I don't think I have it in me at this moment, but I don't know what the future holds. So I always share with our team, that is just the honest truth. I don't mm-hmm. know what my mindset would be down the line. Ideally, honestly, I'd love to tie people into the company. That would be like a dream for me. It would be a win-win all around.
Well, yeah. And that's because you're checking a lot of boxes that are important to you. And mm-hmm. that actually kind of is a perfect migration into you have done, when you've done a lot of interesting reflection, Rob, on what is important to you. I mean, combination of reading all the stuff and meeting all the people that I found out after we sold. You've done it all while you've got your business, which is extremely amazing. But you've started doing that and practicing meditation. And some of the people that I've had on the show, we're dealing with these entrepreneurs that we can't sit still. Right. I mean, your mind's always going. It's this perpetual whirlwind, and even pausing to think about what's important is a common, unfortunate scenario that people have where they don't realize what's important until after the fact. But you've started practicing this meditation, and can you explain how that's changed your life and how you've integrated it and how you use that to help guide you to where you are today?
It's definitely been a progression over time, and it will never end. It will be a continued journey. But one thing that I'll just point out right out of the gates, which is I've come to be okay with what's happening in the moment, right here, right now. And it doesn't mean I have to like it. I just need to show up to it. So I can make changes in my life. I have to look at the bigger picture. So if something's frustrating me, If there's too much coming at me at once, I get to decide. And I get to decide right here, right now, and start taking the steps to make the changes if I need to. And so that's been really opening for me, because I want to control the future. Maybe sometimes I dwell on the past too much. And so, you can't change the past, and you certainly can't control the future, even though we like to think we can. So all you can deal with is the present moment.
So how are you taking, like, actually practically doing that? Because I think, a lot of, me included, like, someone actually called my BS on the show. He's like, no, he's like, you literally just got to stop. Like, and isn't like, when do you take the moment? Because I think a lot of, some people that maybe I think meditation's kind of been demystified lately, which is good. But like, when and how do you do it? How long do you do it? What are the benefits that you see before or afterwards? I mean, like, practically, how does that fit into your day-to-day world?
So let me just preface it by saying I'm probably on the far end of the spectrum in terms of how often I do it. You can get great results by not following exactly what I do. But I wake up very early. I wake up at 4:00 in the morning, and I meditate for 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. In
the evening, before I go to bed, I meditate for 20 minutes. And I'll tell you what those two times do for me. The 45 minutes in the morning, for myself, I would wake up, and within seconds, I'd be thinking about my day already. And, it's like, how does that happen? I just woke up. And so sitting and allowing those thoughts to flow, and then reminding myself to come back to the present moment, my breath, and then inevitably the thoughts start coming back, and bringing myself back to the present moment. It is a practice. That's why they call it that. You're constantly practicing, because it's very difficult to do it. And in the evening, I can't tell you how often I'm just wiped out. I am ready to just be horizontal on my bed and just veg. But I've never once regretted sitting down for 20 minutes and doing the same thing, as all these things that were happening throughout the day are coming through my mind. And as I practice coming back to the present moment and focusing on my breath. So that's what works for me. But people can start with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, once a day, twice a day, whatever works in the schedule. I mean, even if you could just stop for a couple minutes, imagine that. I mean, sometimes we even have a hard time. Let's just say we have all these breakout conference rooms. Let's just say you go in a conference room, shut the door, and just sit there and focus on your breath for like 2 or 3 minutes. It seems like an eternity, but it's so helpful.
Have you ever heard of the app called Headspace?
Yes, I have.
It's a great way to get started, where there's a guy with a ridiculously awesome accent that kind of helps you through it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there, Rob, when I think about what you've gone through and the crazy decisions of selling a company, not selling a company, who do we want to be as an individual, as a company, the culture, all that stuff. How has your meditation and the do nothing philosophy, how has that changed how you make decisions?
Well, first of all, I look to empower the team to make the decisions as often as possible, unless it's something that's my role and I need to be responsible for it. But then I want to collaborate with the team, and I want us all to be bought in, be on the same page, and I want to be able to hear what everybody has to say on the subject. One of the most impactful things for me, and I'm quite sure for the team, is that I worked much harder at being fully present and aware when I'm with them. So when we're meeting and there's a challenge out there or an issue that they're dealing with, I'm listening intensely, but I'm not trying to solve in my head. And there's a big difference there. I think as leaders, we're always thinking, I've got to give this person good direction. I've got to come up with the way to solve this for them. And that's my purpose. And I would argue, actually, our purpose is to just show up, listen, be present, be aware. They'll feel that energy. They'll know that you are fully engaged in what they're talking about. And you're not off thinking about, the next meeting or an email that you just read before you walked in the room or anything like that. And guess what? Usually by talking it through, they usually have the answer. So what a gift. What a gift for me, what a gift for them.
I mean, that's got to be, I mean, I think everybody knows intellectually what you said, but it's very difficult to do.
Gosh, that is so true.
Like, I know I should do this, but then I'm still going to sit there and think about it. So I think, the meditation is the practice that it's just like working a muscle. And you're about your book's about to come out. So can you give us a little bit of a rundown of, what's the book about? Why should someone pick it up? And, do you wrap in a lot of these philosophies?
Yeah, definitely. So Do Nothing, the most rewarding leadership challenge you will ever take is the name of the book. Bo Burlingham actually wrote the foreword for it, which I'm very grateful to him for doing so. He's been meditating for over 40 years and a big proponent of what that's done for him in his life. And so what I do what I share in the book is really a little bit of background on my story, and then just giving the reader the practical tools for how to get started and sticking with it. I also interviewed people from business leaders from all over the country who have a meditation practice and who are highly successful. An example would be Mark Bertolini, who is the CEO of Aetna Insurance with 30,000 employees, and he credits a ton of their success to his meditation practice. So he's a great example, and one that I write about in the book. The other thing I talk about, and this is a stretch for most people, but a number of years ago, I read about and learned about the benefits of taking an extended silent retreat, anywhere from a day to 10 days. I started with 1 day, and I found it to be very impactful. So I started doing 7-day silent retreats, and then the last one I did was 10 days. And so just as a kind of, what does that look like? Because a lot of people ask me. So first of all, there's no talking, silent retreat. But this is where people start to go, like their eyes start to glaze over. There's no reading, no journaling or writing. A typical day, you're sitting and meditating for maybe 20 minutes at a time. You'll do some stretching to stay limber, mindful walking. And this is where you walk back and forth or in a circle. Very slowly. Mindful eating, similar, but you're eating very slowly. You're tasting every last taste of whatever it is that you have in your mouth, and you're thinking about where it came from, and just really raising your awareness. And what I started to find in doing these is something really remarkable. I started to feel my brain again, and I don't think I actually ever knew what my brain felt like until I went on a silent retreat, because I've been so busy since I was 5 years old. How could I remember? So this is an example that I like to share with people. I'm a runner. I've run 14 marathons. And so I know what it's like to train and have a lot of aches and pains and do something, that's a bit of endurance and then recover from it. And when you recover from that, and when I've recovered from that, I start to feel my body again. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. It's so great to not walk away and feel my legs feeling so jello-y or whatever the case might be. And others might just be out gardening or going for a walk and they have aches and pains. And then as their body recovers, they go away. And it's very similar with your brain. So a few days in, you start to feel your brain. And when you start to feel your brain, your thoughts become clearer, your awareness goes up. And so all these things that you're challenged with that are going on in your life, so many of them come to you, and all of a sudden you have more clarity about it. And it's really remarkable. And then you come out of it and you're in a different sort of state, and you go back into the world with a whole new outlook on things until life starts heating up again, and it's time for me for the next one.
Well, I think it's crazy important, Rob, because I honestly, that's on my wish list. I've got two girls, twin girls that are 1 year old, and so I don't know how much my wife would appreciate me just dipping out for a week. But I think it's so important, because as entrepreneurs of running a business and all these dynamics and stressful situations come across, having a clear mind is one of the most important things that we could have, because then you can go into the future with eyes wide open. Otherwise, you're just reacting instead of actually understanding and making the decisions intentionally.
Yes. And you mentioned demystifying it before. And for me, that was really important because I'm not a religious person. I definitely am a spiritual person, but I don't follow any particular religion. And it was, it was something that was on my radar screen. And so when I learned how it is demystified, I mean, I'm oversimplifying it probably, but to me, it's just really taking some time to sit down and follow your breath and allow these thoughts to go. And it's hard to do, but it's a simplistic idea. And so that was part of my purpose for writing the book and doing the retreat. I wanted to do the same thing. So I organized a silent leadership retreat. It's taking place April 23rd to the 26th. And it's only leaders, entrepreneurs, business leaders, some nonprofit leaders. And it's solely focused on people that have these sort of similar things going on in their lives, and they will experience this for 4 days.
That's awesome. I love it. So as we're kind of getting towards the end here, Rob, we talked about a ton, and you've got a lot of gold nuggets that you left us with. But is there one thing you want to highlight that we talked about, or maybe one thing that we didn't that you want to make sure that we leave with the listeners?
Well, I'm going to go back to the meditation and the do nothing, because to me that's a real gold nugget. Might be a platinum nugget. It's a very simple practice that could be put into your lives, and I've seen it time and time again be so helpful for people to just slow things down a little. And I'm just convinced with everything coming at us. You mentioned you have 2 1-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, imagine their world. Everything's coming so fast. Yep. It's probably going to be faster, So I think that by just taking some time during the day to slow down and do nothing, I think that's the best way I could conclude.
So if our listeners want to get in touch with you, want to buy the book, want to look at the retreat or whatever, what is the best way for everybody to get in touch with you?
So the website is donothingbook.com, and all the information on everything I shared with that is right there. There's also links to all the social media, and you can contact me through the website or the social media, and I will 100% get back to you. Also, any resources that you want for your business in terms of the tactical stuff that we're using at imageOne, I'm happy to share. I'm a Forbes contributor, and I have a weekly column. A couple weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the vision and goals process. And if anybody wanted our process and our worksheet to, just message me. And we were inundated with requests, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'll get back to you, I promise.
And I'll put all this stuff in the show notes too. So Rob, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. You were such a pleasure to talk to, and I love the background and connection that we had. That was unbelievable.
I'm glad we spared the listeners with most of this stuff.
For sure.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Absolutely.